Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Unmasking Motherhood, a podcast where I interview mothers from all walks of life to hear real, honest stories about your mothering journey. Along the way, my hope for you is that you feel more connected to yourself, to the mothers in your life, and have a better and deeper understanding that we're not alone on this journey. There's no one right way to be a mother, and it's okay for it to be messy. Today, I have Kelsey on the podcast. We actually just met in person at a Vegas event I had for moms, and she is a lovely human, and I am so excited to have Kelsey on. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I know that's like the normal podcast response, but really, thank you for having me. It's like I've heard a million times when I've listened
Right?
to the car.
That's standard.
Um, Standard, yeah. So I'm Dr. Kelsey. I'm a physical therapist. I'm also a mom of two boys and partner, wife to a sports fanatic. And originally from Seattle, but I'm in Vegas here with our family. It just made the most sense for us. But I specialize as a physical therapist in perinatal and early childhood physical therapy services. So that includes pelvic health for mom through birth prep. That includes all the milestones and airway support, some feeding support for babies, infants up into kindergarten age. So just really those first kind of like 6 years, 6, 7-ish years when you're transitioning from, okay, I'm pregnant to, oh my gosh, my baby is going to kindergarten and they're starting school. I really, as a physical therapist, am passionate about giving you the tools for your health to feel like that is less, maybe a little less intimidating to you.
Mhm.
And really searching for, like you've mentioned before, what does it look for like for you to be a mom? Not necessarily like what your mom did, what your aunties did, what your mother-in-law did, like what you and your life, what does that look like?
So grateful for your voice in that. I feel like we can't have enough women that talk about it and
Yeah.
champion other moms. And I'm sure you basically just see moms all day and kids all day. So you're right there, like supporting them through those early milestones, the anxieties, the physical
Mhm.
issues, and giving that, I can see that emotional piece too, that mental support that you need from someone who gets it. So I applaud you and welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And I would love to talk. We'll talk a little bit more about what you do towards the end of the podcast. So yay. Happy Happy you're here, Kelsey. Let's do this. So, you told us a little bit about yourself. I would like to go back in time and whatever you feel called to share, let us know more about your upbringing, stuff that might help the moms listening have a better understanding of your background and who you are now as a person. Whatever you want to tell us this game.
Yeah, so when it comes to my childhood and my family, I've talked to my mom about this kind of a lot and it's evolved. So I think she'll be okay with me sharing. But basically, I had a stepdad and it was my mom, and she came to the marriage with me, and then he came to the marriage with twins. And so we were kind of like this instant blended family, which
Wow.
at the time, I was born in 87, so it's like it was more common, but I just, there's a lot of things that went along with that that I think childhood wise are still like things that I think about, like what is considered valuable to me um as a parent. Like, is it the time? Is it the financial resources, the stability there? Like, what is that? So that's something that was kind of interesting. And then as far as like my mom is Caucasian and my dad is Samoan. And so my coloring and my hair and all of the things that are kind of make me, people are always like, make you you. We grew up in a very like small rural town, and I didn't really know and have any really understanding of like what that meant as a kid until I left. Because I kind of thought of myself as like the same as everybody else, but I didn't really kind of realize that. And that is still is something that I work with as a mom. I think that reinforces like I want my kids to feel like they are amazing the way that they are.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that is something that I feel like is not really talked about a lot. And sometimes even people are like, wow, your kids don't look anything like you. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't think you understand what that means. to me.
True.
Like it may not mean something to other people, but I don't think you really understand what that means to like to me. And I think some of that masking, like you've talked about in previous episodes, is where it's like the mask of, do you choose to say, because that person's not
Yeah,
intending, but it's like, do you choose to manage that expectation? Who do you look for in support, even if it's not to that random person who you may not know?
right.
How do you manage that experience? And I think that happens a lot with birth trauma too, as far as like, oh, you don't consider it trauma, but I might. Or I might be like, wow, that birth was nuts. And you're like,
It's
eh,
fine.
it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that from the
Yep.
childhood piece of like, wow, how do we process things was big. But yeah, needless to say, I mean, childhood wise, I feel like always having a working, like really strong work ethic was important. Um, but then blending that in with whatever your partner saw too, in regards to work as in a marriage, that becomes a little challenging,
Mm.
just that management of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was curious whenever you were saying you don't know what that means to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So I have kind of acclimated to the point now I always make the joke like, oh, they may not look like me, but they have my attitude. I don't know which is worse. Like, I don't know if
Just have to
that's,
make like a little, yeah,
yeah,
blanket.
like
Yeah.
deflect it, right? A little bit in that sense. So what that means to me is that even in a society that is, or a community that is relatively surface level, not about appearance,
Yeah.
quote, not about appearance, it still is.
Mhm.
So my kids are like, my oldest was blonde as a baby. And I was like, like, my husband is not blonde. I was like,
Oh, weird.
I distinctly remember being like pregnant with you,
Yeah,
going through a vaginal birth. I was there for every second. Like, this is not a reality shift. So for me, that felt
Mm.
very personal because so much of
Mhm.
parenting is, like you said, like that judgment of, if you're in the store, it doesn't matter, but you're in the store and someone thinks like you're the nanny or you're the aunt,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
you're not their mom, would kill me.
oh.
Like, and
You got
that's
those questions or those comments from people?
right, of those comments or those
Yeah.
questions. And I don't think to date, I don't think I've had that exact experience, but when it comes to, if someone doesn't know that I'm my son's mom, that, even though it's like a flippant thing, like if I go to pick him up at school and it's like they don't know you, which I had happen once at his school, and it was just like, people don't understand, may not understand what that means to someone, because I'm like, I am 1,000% his mother. And just because you're making a judgment on what you're seeing, and even like when family would say it, it felt really like when my in-laws or my, husband's family would say it, really felt offensive. Not an intentional offense,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it really felt like, why do we have to talk about it?
Right. Can
Like,
we please just stop talking about this?
what is it even?
I'm
Like,
his
why
mother.
do you have to say it every time? Like, and I know it's someone's projection.
Yeah.
It's someone's projection of them being like, they're part of our family, and that's what you say, I guess, in a project. But I feel like it's just such BS anyways. It's like,
Mm.
I don't say that about my nieces or nephews,
Yeah.
because I don't think that
Yeah.
that's that at the very information to
Yep.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm grateful for this conversation because I don't think we can spread enough awareness about the different things that until you know, you don't know. Unless you're really a conscious person.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone at a store the other day. I don't ask anyone if they're planning on having babies or when they're
Yeah.
going to get married. The joke that we saw, it started because I was at this cute little boutique in Henderson and I was laughing at those like snarky napkins and it
Oh
was
yeah.
like the next time someone asks me when I'm next at a wedding, the next time an older person asks me,
Yeah.
tells me you're next at a wedding, I'm gonna say you're next for the funeral. I was like, oh, but I like that you just don't know, like, or when the pregnancy stuff that we're told, like, wow,
A
you look like
thousand
have,
percent.
or you're so big, so are you. Like, we're
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're up for like everyone's opinions and comments, and it's just what if that woman who doesn't have a baby but has been
Yeah.
married for 5 years just
Yes.
doesn't want one, or
Yeah.
has been miscarrying 5 times, or
Yeah.
is doing IVF, and like, it's
Yes.
just not my place. So unless I literally know a woman intimately, like, or we're like good, it's just, it's just
If
a
you have a
thing.
background with someone, and even then, if you have a background with someone, you may not know to the extent of, unless you've known them their whole life. I mean, literally, unless you're like, you've known them since childhood, you probably don't know the extent to what they're experiencing. So it's not to say that you can't have a discussion about things.
Right.
They are your friend, but I also feel like if someone just says that, that doesn't, that feels really irritating to me when you say that. It doesn't have to be a, oh, you're so sensitive. Because I grew up hearing that a lot too. As far as like, I grew up hearing a lot like, you're so sensitive, like, get over it, that kind of stuff. I think in retrospect, just because my mom just didn't have, I mean, I had two parents in the home. So I had my dad, my stepdad, and my mom, who he was my stepdad since I was probably 2. So he's realistically, like, I call him my dad.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if he really had the bandwidth to have those conversations if I said something in that was sense that I was like irritated by something. And I definitely know my mom did not, because she was working and trying to do all the things. And so in retrospect, I understand her challenge of like why she said why are you so sensitive to this? But I also am just like, that's why it means so much to me now, where I'm like, can you, if I tell you that this is irritating to me, why don't you just ask me why? Instead of just being like, oh, you're so sensitive. Oh, just stop worrying about it.
Yeah. Right. Right. Seeking to understand and not just put our defenses up. Like, if only she would, or people would.
Yeah, people.
The beauty of it is and it's something I've come to terms with in my own backstory, is the things that our earliest caregivers didn't do that we wish they would have.
Mhm.
Often the beauty of it, at least in our generation, we're seeing we are living those out. The things that we
Yeah,
didn't receive, we're more intentional about being those for the world or for our own children.
I definitely feel like I'm attempting to do that for my own kids, as far as like even just the behavioral aspect or the discipline aspect, is that I feel like there was a lot of uh I'm not really a rule follower. I don't know what that is necessarily, but I feel like when it comes to my kids is I'm like,
Yeah.
I will probably give them more grace in that, even if it's against me, even if it's like a refusal for them to do something that I ask them to do, because I know what it's like to be just consistently told by society in general of like, oh, just do what everyone else does. Just do what I'm asking you to do. Just stop having an original thought, which I hate. That
Yeah.
is like nails on a chalkboard for me.
Hmm.
Which probably is not, yeah, from a discipline aspect, for someone who feels like, well, you just fall in line and that's just what you do, is very hard for
Hmm.
me to be like, I just don't agree.
Yeah. Were you always that way, like from a young kid, like a rule breaker, you didn't want to follow rules, or was that something that developed once you were older?
mean, I think that developed in a different way once I was older. I was always very good at like doing the school things. Like I was always doing well in school and being part of the clubs and being part of the extracurriculars in the things that I could do, which were mostly the extracurriculars that I could do, were things that I could join and I didn't need anyone else doing with me. So like I didn't need um my parents to drop me off or pick me up because I could either walk there or I could go after school. And so I just
Mhm.
stayed after school.
Mhm.
Um and then I think when I got into adulthood, a lot of it became more of, well, society says I have to work 9 to 5. I don't want to work 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Society says I have to work as a physical therapist in this capacity, in
Yeah.
this model. I don't want to do that.
Mm.
Um,
You
so
didn't want to fall in line despite the societal expectations or what might have been easier or expected of you. Like
correct.
you still were like,
Correct.
okay.
I was like, but it was interesting in like when it comes to school or when it comes to earlier as a child, it was like I still did those things. I mean, I had to go through grad school, I had to go through undergrad, so I still had to
Yeah.
do those things.
Mhm.
But I felt like I had become better at understanding where, when the opportunity would be available and to take the opportunity and be
Yeah.
like, this is it. This is my opportunity.
Uh-huh.
And now, as having kids and being a mom,
Mhm.
I'm like, ah, okay, it's
Yeah.
very annoying to me, but you're taking this opportunity, and I'm glad that you won't get be pushed over when you're an adult or when you're, a teenager. I'm glad you're not going to be necessarily succumb to peer pressure as much. I mean, we all are influenced and peer pressured into things, but I'm hoping that, the challenge of giving them the autonomy, which is very important to me,
Mhm.
um, will help them as they get older.
Yeah. Yes. Very
You
aligned in
have
that
to get through it
mindset.
now.
What'd you say?
You just have to get through it now. You just have to handle because it's against
Long
you. Because
game.
you're the framework. And so they're like,
Yep.
yeah, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, okay, just remember.
Yep. I know. Oh my goodness. Yes. So much I could say there. I am curious though, whenever you talk about autonomy, and that being important to you, what do you mean by that?
So when I think of autonomy, I think of true decision making that has to do with your, like, what you can control,
Hmm.
uh, or what you can. So autonomy over your body, autonomy over, honestly, when things are happening to you. I mean, the world continues to move around us, but when it comes to consenting to whether you're in a marriage that is fulfilling to you, doesn't have to be perfect, but consenting to that, consenting to whether you as a mom feel like you are taking the steps you need to build relationships with your kid, your children.
Hmm.
I feel like that should be coming from you and not coming from the fact that, like I said, you have this external requirement to be in a job that takes you away from them a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Um, because I feel like that was one of the big things for me where it was like, I have quote autonomy because I have a license to practice, but I don't really feel like I have true autonomy because how I spend my day practicing the scope that I'm licensed for is determined by someone else.
Mm, mm-hmm.
I mean, even as a home health, when I was working in home health, where I was working for a third party payer, it was like an insurance company, or not an insurance company, but an agency who utilized insurance. I was beholden to the insurance company and to the employer because it's like, well, you have to make these quotas, which and they have to run a business. So I get that. But it was like I wasn't determining what those quotas were.
Yeah.
Someone else was. Two
Yep.
other people were determining that. Because of the rates set by the company, which then meant the quota was, affected and all of that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I get this sense that it feels constricting for you to not have your own freedom and decision making, you know?
mhm.
Yeah.
and and a lot of times people are like, yeah, but doesn't there have to be a discipline or doesn't there have to be a framework for things?
Hmm.
There absolutely does. There does have to be a framework, but I feel like you have to determine um I would like to determine what that is. So if I'm working 3 days, if I want to work 5 days a week and see people 5 days a week, then that's my choice. But I don't want to be told I have to see someone at dinner time if dinner time
Mm,
is an important milestone for my family.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
just stuff like that, or like getting out the door. Like if it's morning breakfast is important for your family, it's like having that time to do that instead of feeling like you're kind of cutting that off or like not having,
Really.
yeah,
And
access.
like so many, I think so many women are walking through motherhood unfulfilled or resentful and unhappy. And there's so much nuance in this conversation. Not everyone
Oh,
has the
absolutely.
freedom and ability, I'm just naming that, like to pick their own schedule or do motherhood, well, pick their own schedule. Or some people have to work a certain job, whatever, or have certain
Yeah,
circumstances they
yeah,
have to work within. But
yeah,
I do believe that a major factor that's at play is women not having a sturdy understanding of the things that matter most to them. And
yeah,
unless you, and so you're living out of alignment with them, you're like, or out of integrity with them, should I say. And so if mealtime is really important, but you haven't really claimed that or fully named it,
yes,
like always complaining about we never have mealtime and you're resentful and angry or anxious because of rushing to mealtime, but maybe there could be something shifted and adjusted within your control to honor that value of yours. And how and just that conversation around had if we all better knew
mhm,
clear on those things, how that
mhm.
could impact our mothering experience for the better. So
Yeah. And what is right? Because like for me, as much as it can be a huge pain, sometimes I try really hard to be like, okay, I have the opportunity, I have the chance, I get to pick up my kindergartner from school. Like,
yep.
get to, I get
Yes,
to do
keyword.
that.
The wording matters.
So hard. But even that of like being able to shuffle around and be like, okay, I have to commit that this is happening every week at this time. I have to make my schedule specific to that. And not everyone can do that, like you
Yeah.
said. But if you know that this is concrete, if you know that the schedule that you have for the income for your living expenses or whatever, if you know that is concrete, that you can't change that, then what is flexible? Like you were saying, what is possible for you to say, like, this is, if I can't necessarily change what time this is going to happen and we have to be there, from work for this time, or I have to, what can I?
Mm-hmm.
Always looking for like, what can I use to my advantage?
Yes. Just, yeah, the wording matters. It's like
Yeah.
that growth mindset versus what is the other one? Limited mindset or
Scarcity, is it limited or scarcity?
yeah, yes. That
Yeah.
that whole vibe.
Yeah.
So, man, I've lived that way many years and I still can fall back into it. And it's like,
Yeah. It's easy
oh,
to fall back into that for
so
sure.
as simple as that little shift you said is like, I get to pick my child up from school because maybe you don't want to do the bus, or maybe you just want to be that person there to do it. It matters to you.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain days where it's going to feel like a pain in the butt, but you're like, oh,
Right.
I get to. I don't have to. No one's forcing me,
Yeah.
trying
Like,
to find that workaround.
yeah, like we even, my kindergartner, he is very sweet and he loves to ride his bike to school.
Oh,
And
what do you do?
honestly, I don't, oh, I ride with him, but
Oh,
I don't
this.
like biking. I dislike it. I will never, I'm not going to be the person who's like, hey, let's jump on the bike to go
Yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
food.
Just
I'm
prove
not
that.
going to do that.
Yeah.
I will
Oh,
do it if I'm like, at one point in my life, I worked at a running store and they would give us like an incentive to like a quarter, like an incentive to bike to work and to and from work for our shifts.
oh,
I did it then because I was like, I have this incentive to do it.
yes.
And my,
Without it, you're like,
yeah,
no.
and my child is like, oh, mom, I want to do this. And so it's like, I absolutely don't want to do this, but I will do it. I will force myself every opportunity I get because this that's important to him.
Mhm.
And it's like, I don't, again, nothing against previous generations or my parents per se. They didn't have the job where they could do that, just lifestyle things were not possible. But I was like, I've created this opening and this opportunity to say, okay, you want to ride your bike to school? I can command my schedule to make sure that we are there on time. I'm there on time and I can get to where I need to go on time.
Hmm.
And so, even that kind of thing is like
Yeah.
feels because I would have my parents would have been like, no, we're not doing that. They're like, you have to
Yeah.
ride the bus because we
Not
can't
an
take you.
option.
Not an option. We can't take you. We can't do it.
Hmm.
And so that kind of stuff, like you said, where it doesn't have to be hard per se, but it is something that's very important to me in my motherhood journey. Because we only were picked up if we were bleeding out or if we had a fever. Like, we
Yeah.
were never in the car on
Hmm.
a school day.
Hmm.
It happened.
Oh my goodness. There's one other thing before I have another question for you. Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And what a gift to your son that you're
He
doing
loves it.
that. What?
He loves it.
Yeah, you get a little morning workout on going with him.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be a cherished memory of his, you know?
Yeah, I'm
But
hoping.
like, yeah, I just couldn't help but think too, like, you decided to respond to like a need or a want of his, right? You had the choice to not,
Yeah.
but you did. It lights him up, probably helps him feel bonded to you. Maybe he won't physically say that, but he's like, my mom's doing this thing with me.
Yeah.
And how often are our kids inadvertently or blatantly asking for our attention or a need to be met or pointing through their actions or behaviors or desires, things that they really care about?
Mhm.
Maybe are inviting us to be a part of with them, but we're so busy or in our own world that we're not listening.
Yeah.
And if we could even find little ways to like come into their worlds, even if we don't want to, like I don't love building Legos, but my son sometimes is like, I go, what can I do tonight to bond with you or be a good mommy or whatever, just to see what he says. Occasionally he's like, build with me. I was like, okay, like it
Yeah,
was
that's the
my
same
plan,
reaction.
but
Yes.
he is so happy. Like it lights him up, and I'm like, oh, I need to do this more with him. I came into his world, right? And discipline that night, certain things like typically go smoother, typically when he has felt supported and loved on by me by just those hangouts, that quality time. So, just an invitation for us to all notice what our kids, we can call it love languages or just their preferences are, and never underestimate like the power of that bond strengthening when we are willing to just get a little out of our own comfort zone or step out of what we might typically want,
Yeah.
but for them, but for them,
Yeah.
you know?
And sometimes it doesn't have to be. I mean, like the biking thing around school is probably that's kind of a big thing. Investment in time, mental space, all of that. So I do respect that part of it, but I still stand by the fact that it doesn't always have to feel, like it has to feel like you're sacrificing
Mm,
something on your end. So it could be small. I mean, I hope that listeners
yeah.
feel like it doesn't have to be a big. I use that because I have such a strong feeling
Mhm.
about it. Like such a mental shift for me, but it doesn't necessarily mean I don't want moms to feel like they have to do something
Yeah.
big. It could literally be like putting your phone away. Like you said, building Legos with them
It's
or
small. Yeah.
playing cars, whatever, or drawing something with them.
I love that you name that because we don't need any more pressures or like more on our mental to-do list as moms. So it's just an invitation and something you're probably already doing too. I like to think of that for moms and maybe just to continue on. Maybe this is just encouragement that like, yes. Okay, I'm curious. Did you always want to be a mom? How did that come to be?
I did always want to be a mom. I remember, which maybe this has to do with being a teacher, but I remember
Oh,
being like having stuffed animals and having like roll call, and being like, who's here and who's like all of that. I remember doing that and I loved as I got older, it was like, oh, if we were at a family event, then it would be like, oh, Kelsey's hanging out with the little kids, or Kelsey's like playing with the babies or hanging out with the toddlers or whatever. So I feel like I always gravitated towards that aspect, towards like the pediatric aspect, and I always wanted to be a mom I thought I wanted to be a mom of four. There's no way in hell I could handle four. There's no way. Yeah, we,
Vision versus reality. Like, oh,
oh yeah.
yeah.
It's like, I'm tapped out. There's two
Yeah.
and two. You're not outnumbered. For us, it's a very, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Always wanted to be a mama. What was your earliest experience like with motherhood? Like those early days, or early
Well,
year.
with my first, so I have two. I have an almost 6-year-old and a 3-year-old in October. So he'll be three like this month. Um, two boys. And my earliest experiences were, I remember I didn't think that it would be as hard to take him to daycare as it was. I remember taking him to daycare after my leave from work, and I remember just being like, just crying. Like this is when we were in Seattle, when we were back home near family. So in Vegas, we've had, friends and we've had connections that we've made and stuff, but we don't have like someone I can just drop them off if I'm like,
Right.
we need to leave for a couple hours.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um,
Sure.
so I remember dropping him off at daycare, and that was so hard.
Yeah.
And it actually didn't really get easier. So
Mm,
I feel like there's a lot of like loss or separation. And I started out doing 4 10s. So I had like one day off and then I
oh.
had four.
Mhm.
Um, because I just felt like if I'm gonna be there 8 hours anyways, and I'm gonna commute, why not just like have an entire day where I could devote to family? It's
Yeah.
like, and not everyone's brain works that way. I know some people are like, I need to be a 9 to 5, but I've always had like experimental schedules, I would say, where I've been
Okay.
like, I want to take flexibility here to get to this thing that I'm
Yep.
trying, goal that I'm trying to do. Um, and so my earliest memories were, yeah, in those early years is just being like, how can I spend more time with him? Like, how can I spend more time being available? I remember feeling like kind of guilty or irritated that I didn't think I could ever like go to the mommy and me things
Oh,
because
yeah.
I felt like they were always times when I was working.
Right.
And I remember feeling some of that or some of that like challenge with understanding stay-at-home mom culture. Like I felt like I couldn't really understand. I was like, how is this possible for them? And also not that it's a walk in the park, but like how how do I get there?
So
Um,
would you have wanted that?
so I'm 6 years in,
Yeah.
probably not. I've evolved to the point where I'm like, well, I know I don't want 100%
Yeah.
responsibility and stay at home. I don't think it would be good for anyone, for them or for me. But I want the middle ground. So I want to have, like we were talking about, the
Middle
flexibility. My
ground. Yes.
kid, yeah, like pick my kid up when I want to pick him up and not feel bad about it. I want to be off at 1:30 on a Friday. I want to be off at 1:30 on a Monday so I can
Yes.
pick him up.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think I would always work because I think clinically that's just too much a part of who I am. Like that would just be, I would feel like I was lacking that, but I definitely have evolved to where I want the connection with other moms, and I want the ability to say, oh, like you said, we can go to this mom group if we want to. And I actually did here in Vegas, I did um, Fit for Mom workouts
Yes.
with my second and
Bring him in the stroller.
bring
Yeah.
him in a stroller.
Yes.
And
I
it was
love that.
at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday. And I was
Let's
like,
do it.
look at me. Like, he still ended up going to daycare after that. But I was like, oh, look at this time that we have together. And that is so, so, so fulfilling to me. But it's funny because it can be so confusing for other people, like other moms, other, like my husband, like doesn't really get that. He doesn't really get why that's important, because he's like, why don't you just work 9 to 5 and then have time with us on the weekends?
Mm-hmm.
But my mom, and I think that's something to say. I'm curious your thought on this, but like the cyclical, are people's feminine brains, not every female, but like if you tend to have a feminine brain that works this way, the cycle is longer. So it's like I'm looking at like the whole week together. And like if I can have this time over here and this time over here, and he's
Yeah.
looking at like this is a set time, and then you have this whole expanse of time together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense to you. But
I think so. Are you saying that you both approach the way you set up your schedules differently? Like his is more this concrete, like not black and white, but more this concrete, like this, I just see it as a certain way of doing things makes more sense to him, and another way of doing things makes more sense to you. And that they both are tied to your values. Like he's
yeah,
like, this actually, and also your job schedule, but
yeah. And he's an employee of someone else too. So
okay. Yeah.
so that is also, not determined. His schedule is not all really truly
On his
determined
term.
by him. He has a lot of flexibility, but he's also not a person who's going to be like, this is what I'm going to do. You can like it or not like it. And I'm like, this is what
Yeah.
I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm employed by you, but I can get you better
Yeah.
deals if you just listen to what I'm saying.
My husband does not have choice either with his career.
Yeah,
And so I just don't think he can see another possibility because he literally doesn't have one. And so I'm in a
yeah,
position similar to you, working part-time, where my husband really can't pick the kids up from school or take them. So I'm the one that kind of crafts our life. And so
mhm,
I do put my youngest, who doesn't have to be in school, and we're currently not a homeschool family, so we don't have that kind of structure. 'Cause you can do a lot of beautiful crafting with homeschool, making it
yeah,
really catered. Um, but I don't have to put her in school technically, but I did choose to so that I can work. And also, I value my solitude and
yeah,
time away from my children, knowing that it
yeah,
makes me better mom. So I was like, now I'm about 6 years into that, I'm consciously kind of creating like what works and what do we need in this season, and
yeah,
what part of it do I want to be involved with. And so I think that's kind of the cool invitation for us moms to like
do.
allow our mothering journey to like help us see new sides of ourselves and like build a life that
Yeah.
feels really good to us through
I,
that.
yeah, I think it can be, I think, and maybe this is the mindset shift, maybe this is like the growth versus scarcity, but I think it can be exciting. I don't think it always has to be exhausting. Don't get me wrong. I am on Friday night pizza because my brain is tapped out.
Yep.
Like
Nights.
I'm not saying I have, loads of energy here per se, but I always feel better knowing I can make those decisions. Not even me, sorry. I always feel better that I can present options, that I can find options, that I have the possibility to craft something than the exhausting part of it. The
Mm-hmm.
exhausting part is I think when I get resistance, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
The creation and the creativity part is not the exhausting part, because I can come up with ideas all the time. I think it's the resistance and the slog of like, now I gotta make sure this works for XYZ, and now I gotta consider this angle, and so I hope more moms can feel like that they want to lean into like the excitement of it and the possibility of it versus just acknowledging that the grind and the slog is there. Yeah, but just acknowledging it.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. My MO, or the way I want to show up in this work that I do is like not to put a cookie cutter image ever up there of motherhood, but
Sure.
to paint those possibilities and
Yeah.
to show that motherhood can be like a pathway to your truest self, and it can be fun and it can be
Yeah.
exciting, from schedules to the early stages of newborns to high schoolers. Like
Yeah.
what if we can look at it differently versus it being just the hardships or the negative elements? Because it's not butterflies and roses, but
No, I mean, but like you said this word a couple times that I do think I should probably use it or adopt it more, but the invitation
invitation.
to have that
Hmm.
look different. Like even the invitation to like I have this space that I sublet to people. It's like the invitation for someone to say, "Oh, I just need this like, this she shed," is what I call it. Like
Oh,
I just need this little like your little slice of there's no one else, there's no one judging what you're doing in here. If you're working on your business, if you're doing yoga by yourself
I
with
love it.
off of
Yes.
your phone and that is what fulfills you because you have childcare on a Tuesday, I'm like, by all means, let's
Yep.
support what you're doing here. Um, because maybe that's what you need. Maybe you don't need an opportunity to like make income and blah, 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 but it's like maybe you just need the opportunity to step away from your home and your responsibilities for a minute and recollect and then go back.
Yeah. Have you always been like, I guess I'm curious about your experience of advocating for your needs because I get this sense that you've always had this idea of like a sense of who you are, how you want to what you care about and who you are since you were young. Like in this independence or trying to um be
That's fair. Yeah.
you. But how has that developed? Yeah, and especially as it relates to motherhood, like advocating for what you need.
I I I have from a little kid, I feel like yes, I've always been like I'm just gonna tell you straight what I think. What I think. You don't have to like it.
I
I'm just
love that.
you don't like I said, you don't have to
Um,
like it, but I will be honest if you're gonna ask me a question. Um, which sometimes gets me into trouble because I'll say things to other people, that I've said to my spouse, and people are like, "You said that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I thought I was being nice. I thought that was me being like
yeah,
just
yeah,
clear. I thought I was offering clarity here."
yeah.
Um, so that hasn't always been super great. But in regards to like, have I advocated? Yes. When I think of myself as a middle child because I have older twin step
Right.
siblings
Yeah.
and I have a younger brother. And so in my mind, I think of myself as a middle child in regards to like, you just kind of figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
No one's really asking you what you need, to be quite honest. Because the first ones that come along, they're asking all the questions because they're the first and they don't know what's happening. And then like the baby comes along and they're the last one and they just want to make changes. And like the middle child is just kind of like along for the ride. I mean, that's
I know.
literally
I didn't grow up in that dynamic. I'm an oldest and I have just a little brother.
okay.
But
That's fine.
yeah, no, I'm just thinking about it from seeing like the Cheaper by the Dozen movie, where like
Yeah.
obviously a whole nother extreme, but friends
Yeah.
of mine that are a middle child. Yeah, you're just not
Yeah.
always the forgotten one, but often it can fall that way. Just
And you just kind of learn to say,
yeah,
speak up as like, this is what I'm going to do, or not even necessarily speak up. You just learn to do what
yeah,
you're going to do.
yeah.
Um, and
Hmm.
so I think that is something. And then in regards to like when it's always come to being on a team, like in a sports aspect or being in a club or anything like that, is that I always did well in the team that I was on. But I did tend to be either the captain or the person who was advocating for other people. So as far as like supporting other people, and it always would be like my mission to, yeah, I'm a lone wolf for myself, but I also am like, how can I support you
Hmm.
so that you get what you need? So, even though I may not be the fastest, I did cross country for years. And even though I wasn't the fastest, I was the captain because I was trying to make sure that like I did what I needed to do to support those people that were above me because of whatever natural talent that they had.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of like how I think it developed over time, where it was like if you were in a team position or if you were in a group, like again, this is a group scenario. So the other people that rent it from me I know them, they are colleagues of mine, or they are like, my questions to them are, I'm not necessarily going to be able to like help your business because I'm not an expert in that, but I want to ask you, like, how can I help you as a mom? How can I help you feel like what's going on? Like, how can I help you feel like this is an easier time for you in regards to that? Because that's kind of what the intent of like sharing a space is, to be able to ask someone those questions without fear that either they're going to judge you harshly, or um, they're going to like make an assumption about your business, or like an assumption about what's going on. To
Yeah.
be honest, I have no qualms about that.
Yes, that's probably a gift to them, I can imagine.
Ideally,
Even
yeah.
if it's not been stated, but just more people in our lives that are like that. It doesn't always have to be like I'm offering support for a business, right? Not saying
Right.
you, but like there actually can be value in what you're able to be
Like
that
one of the things, yeah,
passes what the other could be.
right. One of the things we have is, and it's such a small thing, but I always feel like I don't forget. I deprioritize. Honestly,
What?
I
Yeah, yeah,
deprioritize like sending a birthday card
yeah.
to a family member, even though I know when their birthday is. It's just another one of those little things. And so we have like a box of cards and postage. So people can feel
Oh,
like we're taking like one less, and we have some snacks in the fridge. And it's like we're taking one thing off of your plate, because if you're already doing so much of those things,
yeah.
it's just nice to feel like, oh, somebody's got my back in a small way. Or like you have snacks to bring to your kid when you leave here and you go pick them up at drop off. It's
So
like
thoughtful.
so the
Goes
littlest,
a long way.
yeah.
Yes.
So even stuff like that, it's just like I
Wow.
try definitely to advocate in that regard. I think that's just maybe who I am. I also do feel like, I didn't know this until later on, but my biological dad, he's Samoan, so he lives in Samoa. And he apparently has a lot of various businesses there. And I just didn't realize, it's crazy genetics sometimes, as far as like, I didn't talk to him two words until I was 25. But I feel like there's some of those
Wow.
similarities
Yes.
along the lines of like, you're advocating for people to help people out.
Hmm.
And
Entrepreneur, like,
yeah,
yeah. Oh, that was really sweet to hear. Speaking of just motherhood and supporting others, and I wanted to turn it on you for a second and ask, um, well, what tools have supported you in motherhood?
yeah. Um, I think one of the biggest one of the biggest tools I would say is personal responsibility.
Oh, I did
I
not
don't know. I
expect.
know. I was like, that may not be what you're expecting.
No, I love it. I was just like, okay, keep going. Yeah.
Um, because when it comes to motherhood, what I feel like I have learned, or am in the process of learning, is that being able to connect with what I'm in control of, and what I could potentially evolve or utilize, what I have access to, is really my choice. There's a million tools, but if I get the app for the thing and I don't use it, then that really is my, like, no one's gonna force me to
Yeah.
do that.
Yep.
Um, so that's been probably a tool that's not always easy to access, but I think that has been helpful. And then I would say, in regards to like a more traditional tool, I would say any kind of group communication that you go to in person. So I know there's a lot of like, oh, group texts of friends across the country that you were friends with in college and whatever, whatever. Or you're like mom friends that you were friends with, and we came from Seattle, that I was friends in
Yeah.
Seattle with, and now I'm still like, quote, friends with them. But I think really truly what I feel like I've learned over time is the in-person consistent communication. Like you're meeting up like once a month, or you're, because virtual is okay. Virtual is good and can do a lot of things, but I think then when it comes down to like really truly making that connection for support, it's kind of got to be in person every once in a while, even
Oh,
if it's time. So I feel like that's a tool I think that has really helped. Oh, and also, sorry, that actually reminded
yeah,
me,
go ahead.
connecting with daycare, like who's in your daycare. Um, I
Like
feel
a
like
listener?
that's other parents. If you're a daycare family, so if you're not a daycare family, then it would probably be like the mom group, right? That you meet up with often or whatever. But if you are a daycare family, I don't think anyone talks about this, and this is something I like to talk about often. But being able to feel like you're making connections with at least like one of the other families in the kids' class, because they get it. They intimately, even if they're not saying it, they intimately understand what it feels like to drop off your kid at school and they're having a tantrum and you feel like you've done a horrible job, not because they're having a tantrum, but because you can't rescue them and you feel like you should never work again and you're questioning why you even leave. Like they, you know
Oh
what
yeah,
I
the
mean?
whole, no, no.
Like
They get it.
people who don't go through that don't get it. Just like I don't understand hour 23 of being at home with your child and your spouse working all day.
Got a
Like,
break.
I can only imagine it's awful, but I don't really
No.
understand that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I, so I know because you told me before this podcast that your work, your physical therapy work in the world shifted once
Uh,
you became a mom. And I
yeah.
would love to hear more about why that was.
So I again, like my mom had two C-sections, and that was her story of birth. So when I was pregnant with my first, she lovingly, which this is the only information she has, she lovingly was like, I don't know what to tell you because I didn't ever do that. She's like, if you have a C-section, I can kind of maybe speak to that, but I don't really know other than that. So when I had my first, I really felt like I was working in pediatrics and I had always been like, yeah, I do your home exercise, blah, 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 to these parents. And in hindsight, I'm like, ooh, like you have an infant who has an issue or concern. You're already not in a place to do 10 things with them. You're just trying to survive. What am I doing? Like, what am I?
Yeah.
My reality was, just because I didn't have kids, was just
Hmm.
so off. Um, and so when I had my first, I feel like I really had to go into understanding birth, preparing for birth with the tools that I had, which weren't a lot, to be honest. I mean, there's more than maybe an average person because I was in healthcare, but I wasn't treating pelvic health at that time before I had him. I had done like an intro class in school. And then when I had him, I was like, if this is how it is as a person who is in the medical field and has some semblance of awareness,
Yeah.
no wonder this is so awful. And I'm having moms come in and I'm talking to their baby out torticollis and their face is just like, talk about a mask. It's just like, I'm
Uh-huh.
here because my pediatrician told me to come here. I don't really want to do this. Um, to no fault of their own, because it's a lot if it's presented that way.
Hmm.
So that's how it changed. I realized that I just felt like there was not a great bridge between what people know and the reality of the scenario. And I felt like I could help more children and mothers, but I could help more of that population together if I was working with them together. Um, because now I can give something to mom and I can give something for her baby. Like they can both, because they're already such a dyad anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and that's how it's supposed to be.
Yep.
So that's how I evolved it into the population.
Mm. Beautiful. You bridged that gap. Like you saw the need and then you firsthand experience, like knew what it was like. And you're like, it just makes so much sense now that I'm hearing more of your heart, of who you've been for a long time, who you are at work. And like, of course
Yeah.
you're like, I'm gonna figure out a way to help all the people. Like, this is not okay with me, like we're missing the mark. There's a disconnect, right? And so how can I merge those two to be supportive, full spectrum? Because if the baby's supported, the mom's supported, everything just flows.
Exactly. And then they can be, and a lot of people are like, well, you don't treat, like, you could just treat the whole family. And I'm like, I don't want to treat the dads. I'm sorry. I just, like, some people, it's a need, pelvic health for men. Soapbox, it is an absolute need. It's very important.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a real thing. I wish there were more males that treated other males because I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
But in regards to like what I have the capacity for, I just, and maybe it's because I have little kids right now. So I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't get what you're saying, bro. Like, just talk to her and then come back to me and tell me again if like you're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Just, it's a little too close. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
so, but yeah, it's a real need. I mean, as far as that goes, and you're exactly right. If I see, and this can get me into trouble, but if I see a need, I will just create something. And it's not everyone can do that. But I think if you turn it onto yourself, as far as if you see a need, how can you get closer to that? It doesn't have to be the exact thing, but like how can you start dropping coins in the bucket of getting closer
Yeah.
to that
Small
thing? Yeah.
and doable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That feels more approachable and doable than the big jump.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And some people leap. Some people are leapers. I
Yes, they're
mean,
leapers.
I'm that
Really.
person sometimes, but also the other thing is like, evolution of like where like I said, my oldest is going to turn 6 in January of next year. So when I even before I had him, I kept going to different pediatric PT models, like models of care in a hospital, early intervention. I didn't do school. I actually didn't do school, but outpatient, regular clinic. I kept like couldn't quite figure out. I knew peds was it, but I was like, where, like what
Yeah.
age range? I couldn't quite, and so I kept trying to get to the next best thing.
Mhm.
Um, and so I got closer and I got closer and I got closer. And then I had him and I was like, oh, this
There you go.
is what
Yeah.
I was looking for.
Hmm.
And that did take, I mean, I got a business license when he turned a year. But I remember when he was an infant and I would be writing on my giant, it was such a giant computer, which this was not that long ago. This was like 2019. And it was like twice the size. But anyway, so
Oh.
I remember like typing on my computer when he was an infant late at night
Hmm.
of like the things that I wanted to do. I talked to people who are in the industry because I was like, I have this idea. What do you think? And they were like, well, no one's doing it. So I mean, I see it sounds amazing, but no one's really doing that. And so I was like, okay, so there's a potential. But that took from getting a business life, having a child in 2019, January of 2019, that's taken almost 6 years to get to the point where I am doing something that is fully in the passion and what I should be doing. And so I just say that to remind moms, it may be smaller than that. I fully realize that
Yeah.
shifting your entire career is a large ship to turn. It
Totally.
may be smaller than that, but it also could take that long
Yeah. Or
to
longer.
or longer to remove that and adjust that
Yeah.
ask, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That was cool to hear a little more of your backstory there. I I have never seen a physical therapist in the birth world, like perinatally.
Yeah,
I did see certain support people, but not PT.
sure.
So I wonder, because I have thoughts of like, oh, you only see a
Yeah.
pelvic floor physical therapist postpartum if you're peeing,
Yep.
or if sex hurts. Like,
Hmm.
what am I getting wrong? Like, I'm curious, what other, like, I'm sure I'm right about those because I know friends who
Yeah.
have seen people, but like,
Yeah.
where am I missing? What else is possible, and like, what ways PT can support
Hmm.
moms and babies too? I know I've heard about torticollis and certain
Yeah.
like
Feeding things and
yes,
stuff. Yeah.
feeding stuff like that. But yeah,
So
what can you speak to that and any other myths people might have that where they get wrong, what they get
sure.
wrong about your industry?
Sure. Um, so when it comes to, where is that entry? And it's funny, I'm doing a physical therapy, a course for physical therapists who want to treat specifically what I treat. Not what I do, but like the population. So if you're from Missouri, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So if they're in Missouri and they're like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been thinking about, and like how to do that, because it's not really common. So the perinatal aspect is if someone is like 12 weeks and they have had a traumatic birth initially and they want to have a VBAC or an HBAC. So vaginal birth after C-section or home birth after C-section, that would be an amazing time to work with. Yes, you would work with a doula. Yes, you would potentially change if you're going to be in midwifery care or something like that. Um, if or you could go with your regular OB. But in my mind, a physical therapist in that scenario, that's so early, but there's probably some things happening with their pelvic floor, with their pelvic health, with their connection to their pelvic floor that is not working super well, or they need some support and trying to figure out and kind of backtrack that. So that kind of thing is like a myth of where you would only see a chiropractor, or you'd only see a doula, or you
Yep.
would only do a hypnobirthing class.
Had no idea. You're saying
Yeah.
that would help with it would be supportive through birth, like for the
Yes.
labor process even.
Yes.
You're wanting to do. Okay.
So I took, this is the other thing is I took a doula training. I took a certification for doula training
Oh,
because I wanted to, not like it was over the course of time, it was done by doulas who
yeah.
are also pelvic physical therapists. They're on the East Coast. But because I was like, I need to understand and I need to be very comfortable talking about the entire experience. I can't
Yeah.
just be like, I can't have I don't want a mom to just come to a clinic where the grandpa had just gotten a knee replacement and she's doing her exercises on her own and he's over here and then there's a high school kid and then there's you
Yeah.
know, the menopausal woman working on her
All these.
all in the same like
Damn it.
you need specialty understanding. You need someone who's going to be able to walk through physiological birth and understand that entire conversation. Not going to replace your midwife, but the whole point I guess is like the biggest thing I want moms to understand prenatally is that you can craft, like we were talking about before, craft your entire experience to prepare you the best for the most successful birth. I
Mm.
don't know what that's going to look like for you because I can't predict that, but I can absolutely help integrate all the things that you're trying to do so that you're getting to what's considered success for you. Because when it comes to like a pelvic floor exam, um, what I'm looking at is, okay, well, how are those pelvic floor muscles functioning when you're inhaling and exhaling? How would that translate to when you're undergoing discomfort, which is a contraction,
Yeah.
or this intense sensation? How does your pelvic floor respond in that way? And I can't simulate the exact experience, but it really does like help moms understand, oh, this is what you're talking about. This is what the doula is talking about. This is what they're talking about when it comes to this entire confidence of like, where's baby moving into, what's happening, being aware of your body, because those are all very great things.
Mhm.
But as a PT, I'm gonna be like, where your body, where, like, no, show me.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
what? Like
You go
literally,
all the way, you show us. Yeah.
we can be, because we can be up here. Like
Yeah.
we can be really like, I'm grounded, I'm amazing, I'm doing all the things, I'm seeing the sparkles. We can be really up here, but like we kind of got to get into the nitty gritty of like what's
Mhm.
happening here.
Yeah.
Really. So that's the prenatal aspect that I think, but you have to see someone who think of themselves as a birth worker. Like I think of myself as a birth worker with a physical therapy license and specialty training. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily only think of myself as a physical therapist. And I think that's where I've gone in a totally different
Okay.
direction, right? Because I'm like, I'll talk to you about your placenta, or I'll talk to you about these other things. And sometimes you get a pelvic health person who's not necessarily, they're like, yeah, these are the muscles and this is what you do. And it's like not that simple. It's just not even close. I mean, you've given birth. It's not even close to that simple.
Yeah. So look out if someone is listening that doesn't live in Vegas that wants
Yeah.
to work potentially like during pregnancy or postpartum with
Yeah.
someone that has similar specialties as you,
Yeah.
want to look for a PT that also maybe considers himself a birth worker or what other
Yeah.
keywords?
Can talk birth,
Yeah.
like that can talk birth confidently and understand the nuances of it. Which I do tend to live in the gray, like I tend to live in the gray as a person. And so that's probably maybe more of a personality trait that you're looking for somebody with. But, that's the myth, I think, of like, oh, what happens in prenatal therapy, like prenatal PT or just birth prep is like, is it all just mind work? And it's like, no, we're like understanding what a labor position is, how your pelvic floor responds, how your back responds to this. Like
Yeah.
we really get into those aspects. And then when it comes to like the things you even had mentioned about postpartum of like painful intercourse, sometimes people even will, I hear so often like, oh, it's not that bad. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay, not that bad is not pleasure.
Mhm.
Like not that bad is, and again, I don't know what the like editing is here, but not that bad is not an orgasm. Like that's just like, let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
So, in those regards, postpartum, it's like there's something not happening there either that is important and you deserve to understand. And then when it comes to, which this is kind of a big jump, big leap, but when it comes to babies, regards to tummy time, regards to airway issues, regards to feeding, breastfeeding, bottle feeding, there's a lot there's a lot that I'm working on in those first like 6-ish months that helps set baby up to make the rest of their journey easier.
Are you talking
Not
about
perfect.
manipulation? Sorry, or like
Yeah.
massage? Like what
So,
kind of
mani-
chiropractor that a yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like fascial manipulation. So the layers of skin, fascia, muscle, um, ligaments, adipose, all the actual fascial work that would be experienced. And then what we do, so it's kind of like if we stretch, we move, we give you all of this freedom. And then you don't know how to move because you don't really know how to use those muscles together. You could have it's kind of like having like, if we give you the freedom of a giant field, give you the freedom of a giant field, and you're just standing there. You're not doing anything with this space and this freedom that you were just given. You don't have tools. We don't have any kind of um, like a bike to ride around the field. We don't have like community to be in there with you to interact. We don't have other, and so that analogy is like you don't have the muscles working together. It's just the thing that's open. We just have this freedom. And so that's where a lot of times a baby can be so calm and so like loose and flexible. But if you've made them flexible, but then you're not actually connecting those muscles together, they're not doing the skills, or they're not engaging in their life,
Mhm.
really. And so that's where the baby part comes into play, is like manual, hands-on. It's really a big mix of manual work, hands-on work, and like mindset work. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
integrate
it's more holistic. Yeah,
it.
integrated.
Yeah, yeah. So how would someone know if they have a baby, like if they have a baby between 0 and 6, 0 to 7, like if they would need your support?
Yeah. So normally, yes, there's some pediatrician support as far as like if they feel like they're, not hitting milestones. But my biggest, and I just learned that at a course, this clinical mentorship I did this week, was the reality that breastfeeding or feeding off of a bottle effectively, is the first motor skill that we have in life. So if they feel like breastfeeding is not going well, or if they feel like bottle feeding is not going well, um, or if they're not making the conscious decision to do one or the other, and they just feel like they're kind of like, well, it didn't really work, so I just stopped. That actually maybe is more of a concern, not because they're not choosing what is best for their family, but because maybe there's some things that are happening with baby and with their strength and with their tension patterns that they would need to see me, as far as like, okay, let's figure out why, like what's the root cause of this,
Okay.
versus just being like, oh, nothing, like they're just really calm, or they just really had a hard time feeding, so we just switched it over to something else.
Yep. But there could be some underlying issue that you can.
Something happening, because then typically what you'll see later is that you will see that crawling is hard, you'll see that walking is delayed, you'll see that some of these other things are not happening the way that you thought, and so you feel like it's a that time problem, but it's actually probably, if you back it up, there's some other things that are happening.
Okay. See, what I think of traditionally with stuff like that, maybe a woman might see a lactation consultant,
And
but
they would.
and that could be helpful, but there also is an extent where they can't do the hands-on tap into the body the way that you could.
Right,
So
because we work together.
I can
Yeah.
see there needing to be partnerships between,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
unity there.
Yes, it's like, because they have those skills, and that's also too like why I'm trying to kind of make this more of a hub of someone who is, they're not, my employee or anything like that, but they are a service that we talk about how to help our clients the best often. It's not like, oh, I just refer to you and then I don't know what happens. It's like, no, we are communicating, saying like, oh, we tried this in this session. What did it look like for you guys?
Oh,
Because
so
that's the other thing moms don't want. Moms don't want to have to be the messenger between 5 people on their team.
yeah, I'm already doing
The
it.
last thing that you want.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, we barely want to do that with teachers, let alone like,
That's a lot.
you know,
That's so
no,
amazing.
yeah, yeah,
There, yeah. So needed. I feel like in every major city, like there needs to be people
me
doing
too.
it.
Yes.
Moms, yeah. Okay, so I'm realizing we're at time where we need to
Yep.
be wrapping up this rodeo. But I have one other question for you. I wondered if you could answer before we wrap up. So, present day, if you had 100 moms in front of you and you're just like, I need to tell them this, like, what would you want moms to know? What message do you just feel is on your heart to share with moms?
I I would want them to know that taking taking stock of what they need and small changes to reach those needs are just as powerful as the big dream. So being able to make those small changes, even if it's just a simple thing of you telling your spouse what you need, even if it doesn't come back, even if it's not like an instant thing that's going to happen,
Yep.
that could be a win. Even connecting to the friends, like one or two that you feel you're like, I should talk to them, I should text them, I should just like say hello, no response needed.
Mhm.
Those little things I think can really help with the challenges of motherhood.
Mm-hmm. So almost what I'm get like sensing is instead of just having the needs but keeping them within you, like
Yeah.
action on them, even the small
Yep.
ones.
Yep. Even
That
the small ones and even the small action.
yeah. It's like a way
Mm.
to love yourself. I almost see
Yep.
it like instead of like, oh, this matters, but you're like, I shouldn't want that, or they won't respond, or I don't want to seem needy. Like
Right.
it's the very act of doing them can
Yeah.
be a way to say, I still see you, you still matter, even though the kids matter a lot too. Like
They
I haven't
do.
forgotten
Yeah.
you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, friend. It's
Thank
been
you.
fun to chat with you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your heart and more of your story with us. And yeah, I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you so much for your time.